Greg Dell here with attorney Cesar Gavidia, and we're going to discuss Principal Financial Group and specifically reviews of Principal Financial. On our website, we have a lot of reviews from policyholders of Principal who share their experiences, and the benefit of that is that other people get to learn what they've been through, so they don't feel like they're alone in the situation they're going through, but more importantly, they learn about things that happen to them so it doesn't happen to others. Or it helps people prevent a denial from happening because they see what Principal did to somebody. But from our perspective, we talk from basically the other side because we've seen hundreds of Principal financial claims, worked on them, whether it's having someone apply, an appeal, a lawsuit, every aspect of a Principal claim. And a lot of people want to know, what's our view of Principal Financial? Where do we see them in this world of 40 different disability insurance companies? And the first question to you, Cesar, is from a perspective of someone calling you with Principal versus any other company that could be out there, what comes to your mind when they say, hey, I have a Principal Financial claim?
Yeah, so most often we're talking about someone with an individual disability policy with Principal. Although they insure group disability, it's I don't think a bulk of their business, and most of their insurance products I think are in individual disability policies. So that means they're policies that are often sold to professionals, to people that are looking to insure their own occupation. In fact, I have my own individual policies with Principal. And the reason is that generally they're a company that I think in comparison to some of the other disability insurers, I felt comfortable with them insuring me because I've had more often than not good experiences with Principal, either on the claim side and representing claimants and applying for benefits, or if they're in the middle of a review, someone has already submitted their disability claim, and say they're kind of going through the investigatory part of the claim, and they're asking for information and documents and financials. We come in and we'll kind of get everything organized and streamlined and try to get that claim approved, and most of the time we're successful. Okay, so not a lot of negative, bad experiences with Principal, at least not in my part, and that's why I went personally with there. And this isn't like necessarily an endorsement to telling anybody, hey, go buy Principal disability insurance. I'm just telling you from my own experience. But one of the things that people need to understand with Principal individual policies, and you ask what comes to mind, is that sometimes in their individual policies, they tend to be a little bit more restrictive, and you have to kind of buy up into the more favorable language for example, true own occupation disability. In other words, if you're seeking to insure your own occupation and you're looking for a policy that if you're not able to perform the substantial material duties of your own occupation, whether you become employed or you begin working in another occupation, you have to kind of buy up to that with Principal. That's not in the kind of base level policy.
It's not the default language.
Right. So you have to pay a little more for that. They sometimes are restrictive with certain conditions like mental nervous limitations. That is also a very common part of a Principal individual policy, that if you have a disability that results from depression, anxiety, or any other mental nervous issue, mental psychological issue, that there's going to be limitations on how long they pay, usually 24 months into those policies. And sometimes you can buy out of that limitation, get that limitation wiped off that policy, and have coverage that may extend to age 65. And then there's also lifetime extensions and things like that for benefits. But everything is, you have to kind of buy up to that. You start with the base car, and then you're adding the options.
So Principal has many options in the policies. They also do the group policies as well that employers can offer to their employees. Our experience tends to be more on the individual side. As you were saying, we see a lot more of those claims because we represent claimants in all occupations, but we've represented tons of lawyers, doctors, business owners who tend to buy those particular policies. But from a claims handling side, because the agents sell the policies, they don't know a lot about what's going on the claims handling side. They just say, hey, this is a good product that could protect you. Some companies, when they're reviewing claim, review it from a perspective to say, what can I find in the claim to not pay this particular, what can I find in the review of the evidence to not pay? And some companies look at it and say, where can I find the evidence here that supports disability? Which way do you find that principal leans when reviewing a file?
So in terms of my experience with
Right.
principal, it really has tended to go, we're seeking out the evidence to approve this claim. So we want to work with you to give us the proof that we need to get over that hurdle, that obstacle that right now is not allowing us to pay these benefits, or that
Right.
we need to get through this threshold. And oftentimes it's information that they lack on the medical side. So if they're awaiting a report from one of the claimant's doctors, and this comes to mind in terms of sometimes they're attending physician statements, which seem to be very comprehensive in terms of what the list of questions and things they're seeking and asking for. Okay, so they're sending these out to your doctors. That's just going into some pile of papers that sometimes they starts growing at a doctor's office,
Right.
and it just kind of gets lost in the shuffle, and they don't get it back. And they need this information back to be able to say, okay, well, your doctor's explaining what your conditions are, what your limitations are. Everything seems to be consistent with what is reflected in the medical records. We're proving your claim. So there's oftentimes that problem because, again, like I said, those forms are very comprehensive, and they're comprehensive because now they're going back and everything your doctor's putting in those forms, they're going back and cross-checking with those medical records that they're getting from those doctors. Financials. They have a financial review team, accountants, a team of accountants that when they ask for example, profit and loss statements from your business, corporate tax returns, your individual returns, they're doing an audit basically of all of this document, all of this financial information, all these financial documents, almost like what the IRS might do, okay? And they're going to have questions, and they're going to want to have their financial team sometimes speak with you or speak with your accountant if you have an accountant who's preparing everything. And that could be a very complicated conversation or situation to be in, because sometimes you're not even going to be understanding what they're talking about, okay? Why they're taking issue with some of the expenses that you're reflecting in your records, why they're asking questions about a decline in revenue over this period of time versus what was happening a few months before or a year or two before. So that's another thing that...
So it sounds like what you're indicating is that Principal, first of all, we didn't say this, but they are one of the smaller disability companies. I mean, in terms of the top 15 companies, they're definitely in the bottom 10 to 15 in terms of revenue, so they're not one of the big players out there. But from your experience, it sounds like you're saying, look, they have resources, they have medical doctors, they have financial people inside, they have trained claims reps who are going to do a far more detailed review of a claim than your big mass-produced, mass volume type insurance company like a Unum, a Prudential, a New York Life, those kinds of companies that sell high volume and just try to do as minimal a review as possible of a claim, whereas Principal is going to put the time in and put more detail into looking at the claim. Is that an accurate representation? Absolutely. But with that, Caesar, and when we see reviews, we have some positive, we have some negative. The more experienced claims person is going to potentially expect a higher level of detail in presenting your claim because they have the time to go through a claim and say, hey, I understand what you're saying, claimant, when you're talking to us, Principal, but your medical records aren't matching what you're saying. So how do you, and then that's a big source of complaint. Like, I told Principal everything and they're still telling me I'm not disabled. They don't understand. And the problem is that your medical records probably really aren't matching what the claimant's saying. We see that all the time. Are you able to work with Principal and clean that up and make it so that Principal sees the perspective of the claimant? And how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, we're certainly trying to achieve that. We want to work with Principal, and that's one of the things I tell them. I say, look, my involvement here is to try to facilitate to get this claim approved and get you what you need. You're telling me that on the medical side, the records aren't matching what the complaints are. Well, we've got these tests that have been done. And sometimes we have to kind of bring this out and say, look, you're focusing on the wrong information. Your attention needs to be directed here. And we work with them to really understand what the records are reflecting and what our client is saying. And sometimes, the reason that there's that inconsistency, is because doctors often aren't very good note takers. They're not really great historians or they're not documenting things very well. They're either using a lot of treatment providers these days are using just kind of software and plugging information in and symptoms in and diagnoses in without a real clear, detailed explanation like you would maybe see, in the years ago when doctors were sometimes handwriting their notes or dictating their notes.
Right.
Because that's not happening anymore.
So you find that you get involved with a claim in this situation, that principal is more likely to listen to the additional information that you're providing them and the arguments you're providing them, whereas there's many other companies who would just be like, sorry, the medical records don't say that,
right.
Go home. Well, that's a real positive thing to take away, especially gives hope to people who are in a position where they feel like, gosh, my claim's denied, it's going to get denied, I can't communicate with this company. But there are doors that open up when you have an attorney representing you, because we've worked so many times with the people at Principal, and it's a business-to-business relationship that we try to explain to claimants to say, look, we know how to get them what they need. If they're missing something, we'll either send you back to the doctor, we'll call the doctor. We'll make sure that you document your records appropriately so that if that particular restriction or limitation is missing, we'll make sure you go through the appropriate tests, or that your doctor administers the appropriate exam or test to you so that you can have the support you need. Because it's often the very little details that are missing that lead to denial. And every time you look at something, you look at a medical record, or you look at the way a claimant statement's done, or you look at the way an attending physician statement's done, you and I both know in a matter of seconds this is going to be a problem. Doesn't mean it's going to be a denial, not necessarily, but it could lead to denial, or it's going to lead to a denial depending upon who gets a hold of it at Principal. So you got to be very detailed in your medical records, in the claimant statements, in the claim forms. You got to maintain that relationship with the person at Principal so that they get to know the claim well. And often, we don't like the claimants to talk to them at all. So we become the voice for our claimants with Principal when we're representing them, which puts them in a much better perspective so that we can shape the narrative of what Principal sees about them, and also make sure that the claimants are doing everything consistent with the policy language, because definitions of disability change. 1 minute, not 1 minute, for a certain period of time, whether it's 24 months or whatever, it could be own occupation. You could have bought an own occupation for the duration of the policy, or it could change to any gainful occupation. Mm-hmm. Or we have lots of doctors, for example, who are in own occupation but start another job but still collect total disability. So that's how you started this video, talking about all the different options like buying a car that are available for Principal. But, tons of videos out there on Principal, how to handle every aspect of the claim. We encourage people to call you, call me, call any of our lawyers if they need help with a claim. That's what we're here for. We appreciate people putting out there the reviews and sharing their experience, and we hope they keep doing that. We always offer a free consultation, and we're available all over the country to assist you with your Principal financial claim.